Hi guys, it's Janet with another episode of Living Room Talk. This is a first for me. I have a very special member of the NATA speaking here. David, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Janet, thanks for having me. First of all, I'm excited. I've already enjoyed our pre-recording conversation, so I'm looking forward to tonight. But my name is David Gallegos. I'm a board of director and the current vice president of the NATA. I am out of District 7, so I work in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is right along the southern New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico border. I manage a physical therapy practice that has 3 facilities, 2 in New Mexico and 1 in Texas. So I'm the deputy CEO of that business and also the director of our sports medicine programs.
So tell me a little bit of your path to becoming a board of directors member.
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually just spoke about this as a board recently in terms of our DEIA discussions and pathways to leadership. And I really have to tell you that it's all about being voluntold. And so when I participated in New Mexico activities and New Mexico leadership, positions for some time, but I had one of my graduating classmates nominate me for the secretary position for the Rocky Mountain Athletic Trainers Association, at which time I had not done any district service. So I went from kind of just being happy in New Mexico, serving, doing my own thing in my city, to being kind of thrust into a position of a district elected position. And I was lucky enough to be elected. And then from being the secretary, I had put myself in front of the membership for 4 years, right? So running for district director was not that far off of my reach because people kind of knew me from being involved. So I went from New Mexico activities to district secretary to district director and then to vice president. So I do have to say, myself and Lynn Nakagawa, and maybe now Donna out of District 9 are some of the younger members in the board, and it's quite interesting to me to reflect back on everybody's tenure to get there. Each district has a different requirement to become a director, right? And then those directors become the NATA board. And so I really feel very lucky because I kind of had a turbo boost through that process, and I think I probably have less formal leadership years than many of the other ones in there, because one, of my age, and two, the way that I kind of skipped. So I'm very appreciative of District 7 bylaws and policies that allow somebody to run for position without having to have previous positions already held. And so in terms of, leadership access, I'm really excited to share the District 7 story. And as part of our NATA Board of Directors initiatives, we'll be looking at the different district policies and which ones are supportive of, a quick access or a direct channel, which ones are maybe more heavy in terms of service pre-board of director. And so we're going to look at all that. But I'm very lucky, and I'm one of the younger on the board, so I'm excited to hold that position.
What was the learning curve like being on the board?
The learning curve, that's a good question. The learning curve was not really about the board activities. I mean, we have monthly conference calls, right? We have agendas that come out 10 days in advance. You have to do your research, and for every board meeting, there's probably 6 or 7 hours of reading that goes into preparing for that board meeting. So that's one. You can't just show up to a board meeting and expect to fly, right? So you have to do some research. But the biggest, I think, learning curve that I had was every board of director is assigned to different committees as a liaison, right? And previous to that, I had not done liaison work. So I'm used to being in a boardroom and voting and discussing and, making your points. But then to take a new role as almost like a mentor and an advocate and a lobbyist, even somewhat, for the different committees, that was the biggest learning curve. And to have committees that I've never been part of, you have to learn their history, their structure, their vision, right, and bring that to the board. And then you have 3 or 4 other committees. And so that was definitely the biggest learning curve. And obviously something I'm super proud of, because now I've participated in committees that I probably would have never participated in based on where I work and what I do. And now I have, but that was the learning curve, and it still is. I mean, I'm I just had 2 or 3 calls today about committee work, so it's definitely the challenge.
So on average, if you had to put a number on it, and I know athletic trainers hate this question, how many hours do you put in a week? How much time is devoted to this NATA work?
Oh, that's a good. Okay, so for the board, I probably do 2, 4, I'd say 4 hours on average a week. In weeks and months that we don't have meetings, like a joint committee meeting or NATA meeting or a May board meeting or even a Capitol Hill Day, those actual events obviously require a lot more hours. But in general, I have probably two to three conference calls, anywhere between half an hour to an hour. And I probably have 2 to 3 short phone calls, another 15 to 20 minutes throughout the week. So I don't know, maybe 4 hours a week. Now, of course, this is my 5th year, right? You kind of figure out how to do it, what to do. I think initially, especially after COVID, because COVID compressed everybody's schedule to now doing Zooms, and you can have meetings at any time, right? Before COVID, we had very structured times, and I knew way in advance when I was going to have a meeting. And now post COVID, it's like, hey, can we have a meeting in 20 minutes? Are you free right now? And it's really shifted. So right after COVID, there was a heavy workload, I'd have to say, much heavier than I expected. But now it's trickling back down to what I'm more used to, and what I think the next board of directors behind us will have.
So switching gears a little bit, you're
Yeah.
definitely an entrepreneur, a business leader. How was that learning curve or transition?
So I wrote an article in let's see, I think it was January 2020 Athletic Training Education Journal, and it's an editorial about designing your first athletic training room, right? That was an activity that I think everybody had to do as part of their organization administration class, right? And that was my real understanding of healthcare, like in a business model, and healthcare outside of the athletic training facility. And so I had that educational background, and when I went into the clinic, it was a skyrocket of learning. I had gone from a high school public institution to a private practice, right, which is a practice that's not supported by a local hospital or anything like that. So really, what you eat is what you kill in a private practice, right? Versus like a public institution. I hate to say it, but you could be really good or really bad, and you probably still get the same money, right? But in a private institution, if you're not pushing, out your best work all the time consistently, you're falling behind. So that learning curve was so tremendous that it probably took me 2 years of being outside of the public high school setting to say, okay, now I'm comfortable. And in that 2 years, I really questioned, am I ready for this? Is this what I want to do? Should I go back and be in a different position? And now when I look back, I love it, right? But I felt so kind of out of place for a while that I wrote that article. So if you're interested in some nighttime put you to sleep reading, right? It's only 2 pages, but it really talks about the learning curve from going from public work to private work, and from like a everybody gets healthcare kind of model like you have in a secondary school to a very privatized model where only those with the best insurances and the best money and the best access get healthcare. And that whole dichotomy is tremendous. And so I'm a big advocate now for healthcare administration, business education, right? Because it's just fundamental. And the way that we're going as a profession, going after greater autonomy, greater recognition as healthcare providers, maybe CMS recognition and third-party billing, all those type of business skills and acumen are going to be critical to our success moving forward. So yeah, I push that all the time.
So it sounds like you've been in a lot of situations when you had to get outside your comfort zone, and it comes with doubts and it comes with a lot of, self-doubt, obviously. How did you overcome that? What were some of your strategies?
Ooh, I think everybody needs a mentor. I don't think at any level you can say, okay, I'm topped out. I don't need somebody to support me. And so I think finding a really, really strong mentor is probably the most critical piece or a critical piece of advice I could give. If you're going to go into some situation where you're not comfortable, you have to have a network to lean on a little bit. And for me, I had the owner that recruited me into the position became my healthcare business mentor, right? But I still rely mentally on my cohort of students that I graduated with. You know, one of the things that I have done, at least tried to do, is everybody that I meet, even like yourself, Janet, you know, like, okay, she's unique, she has this great talk show, she's asked the tough questions, and you start to put these kind of like personalities in the back of your mind. And then when you get into difficult situations, you're like, okay, you know, what would my friends do? What would Janet do? What would my mentor Denise do? And you have like this internal discussion with yourself with these characters that you've met along the way. And so some of my mentors are live mentors, and some of them are people that have mentored me in the past, and I just try to extrapolate what they'd say today. And I think that's probably my biggest piece of advice. Don't think you can step out and then be all by yourself. You'll struggle. You need to have people with you.
So you mentioned DEI initiatives in a little bit. How do you view representation in our profession?
Ooh, there's so much, you know. I mean, obviously, there's ethnicity and race, and um, you know, age, um, orientation. There's like so many ways to identify yourself now. It's not just, you know, like guys and girls. It's not that simple anymore, really, to be honest with you. Or maybe it never really was. Now we just have better ways to explain it. But representation to me means that I would love to see somebody that looked like me in a position that I want to be in, right? That would be great representation. That's probably the simplistic form, the easiest way for me to connect. But I think it also, for me, is people that think like me. So if I can listen to somebody, I'm like, okay, they don't look like me, but they have a very similar perspective or a similar vision, then for me, that's also a representation. And so the DEIA task force and our subgroups has created some great discussion on really that exact question. You know, where does the bubble end? Like what kind of representation is needed? And as a board, are we representative of those that we lead or those that we serve, right? And if so, in which ways? And right now, our board, if you were to look at it from an ethnicity standpoint, we got myself on there, right? You have Lynn Nakagawa on there, which is awesome. In a year, when we both roll off in June, neither one of us will be on there, right? So the representation of that picture changes quite a bit, but there's still all those other types of representations, right? And so I think it is an important discussion to have that to me, it's somewhat fluid. It's not like you can get to the end result and say, okay, now we're perfect represented, right? It doesn't work like that, but it's this process that you're always trying to go to, and you're trying to find people that I think challenge you, but also support you, and that's probably representation.
So my last question to you, and it is my favorite question to ask speakers, is tell me about an embarrassing moment you've had and what lesson did you learn from it?
Very good. Well, I'll tell you, I used to work in a high school. I worked in a high school for almost 10 years. And as a young athletic trainer, I think I was, I don't know, 24 years old, 23 years old when I first started. And many of the students said, hey, they called me Mr. G at that time. Hey, Mr. G, you should run for faculty homecoming king, right? Like you're young and involved. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that stuff. I'm not the kind of person that likes to stand on a stage and, you know, do things and dance and sing and all those kind of. So I wasn't going to do it. But for some reason, something in my mind said, just do it. I mean, you're like, just do it. So I ended up having to do a lot of things that week for homecoming. And one of them was I had to lip sync a song. And at that time, Eminem, Slim Shady was really popular, right? And the guy that went before me in his presentation, the other faculty killed it. He sang like a 60s song. He's a little bit older guy, 60s song, but he actually did a really, really good job, better than I had planned on doing. So at the last second, I'm like, okay, I got a couple of football players, and they were my Slim Shadys behind me. And instead of lip syncing, I actually sang over the lyrics and I don't know what happened to me. I kind of just lost it. Ended up throwing little towels, waving up in the stands and jumping around. And afterwards, I have no clue what I had done. I flipped I flipped it, like I just let it go. I had a great time. And now when I think back, I'm like, what was I thinking? That was like, that's so not me, right? But it was embarrassing probably more now than it was then. At that time, I think I was just on adrenaline. But I really enjoy kind of having that experience because I know that I can be a person that steps out and enjoys the stage and has a great time and doesn't mind being embarrassed if I really want to, right? So it's one of those like kind of hidden skills. I tend to be pretty reserved and I don't know what you want to call it, low key, professional. But I know that I can flip that switch if I really want to and have a good time. So that's probably what I learned from that.
It probably was a great talking point for years to come.
Yeah, it still is. See? Yeah, I had a great time. Yeah. So I wish I could remember that song and do all those dances. That was like 20 some years ago, but
I mean, I just thought of a great NATA foundation thing that for the next conference right there. I'm just throwing out ideas and suggestions right now.
You're not saying, you're just saying, right?
I'm just saying, but not saying. Lip sync battle, board of directors, put my money on who is better.
Oh, The Voice, right? The Voice board of directors.
Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and we will definitely speak again soon.
It was my pleasure, Janet. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Bye.